Hey there, it's time for another episode of. I'm not really sure what to call this episode. We're not going to play Marvel Champions, which is what it looks like out here, but I want to talk about Marvel Champions. And then I also want to talk about some of the setup that I've got to record the plays that I do of Marvel Champions. So I don't know what I'm going to call this yet, but it will probably have a title by the time I put this online. So let's talk about the bling that I've got for Marvel Champions. All right, so things that I think are important right off of the bat for playing Marvel Champions, and I'll talk about some of the things that absolutely it's just bling. You don't need it. Like it's nice to have, but you get by without it. So let's see. If I talk about my first thing that I think you're going to need for Marvel Champions, for me personally, and there will be some disagreement, and the people that disagree with me are just wrong, are card sleeves. So I am one of those people that likes to sleeve all of my cards. So I have a lot of games and I have a lot of card sleeves. I tend to go with premium sleeves, and honestly, in some cases I'm spending more money on sleeves than I'm spending on games. But that's a personal preference thing. And if you don't like sleeves, that's you're okay being wrong. You should have sleeves on your cards. Um, Normally, what I get are the Ultra Pro matte sleeves, but recently I've gone over to some cheaper sleeves, and the reason for that is I've been getting sleeves that are matte on both sides. And the reason I've been doing that is it does make the cards a little less clear, but the reflection from the light as I record, I believe it helps that out. So the Ultra Pro matte is what I would recommend if you're just playing, but you might look for sleeves that are matte on both sides if you're recording and you tend to get bad reflection. So that's probably the number one thing is sleeves for your cards. And if you don't do that, then you're wrong. Okay. Second thing is the next thing I would go after if I was playing Marvel Champions would be organization. So as you buy expansions, the first thing you're going to run into is a lack of space. The red thing that comes in the box is crap. And mine was actually broken when I got it at first. It had a tear in it. So quickly, what I ended up doing personally was I 3D printed, and I'll put a link to the 3D printed insert that I used for this. I 3D printed an insert for Marvel Champions. Now, I don't think you need to, like, 3D printing is not the only way to go about this. You could do it with foam core. I've seen people make great inserts out of that. But the one that I'm personally using is a 3D printed version because I happen to have a 3D printer, right? Foam core from the hobby store. I've made inserts for some of my other games just by going to the dollar store and getting some foam core, cutting that out. And what's the one that I've got? Dragon Brew, I believe, is the name of it. I have a foam core insert for that I love, so that I made myself. This one, there happened to be some designs online that I 3D printed one for. So I would say replace your insert would be one thing, and then print off, if you go to Board Game Geek, dividers. So there's plenty of people that make them on Etsy. You could buy them if you want to, or what I did was I got a little bit upgraded card stock to go through my printer, and you could go to Kinko's or whatever your local, I think FedEx does printing now. Kinko's is probably dating me. Go to your local place that can run you some prints and do a print job of these dividers that you can find on Board Game Geek. I think those help a lot to keep the organization going. I tend to, like, I have my She-Hulk deck that I keep together. I only have one core set. I have been thinking about buying another core set so I can keep more decks together, but usually about 2 or 3 decks is what I have together at any given point in time. So I have my She-Hulk deck, the Iron Man Technova deck that I'm playing right now, I'm keeping together. But other than that, I've split everything else out. So sleeves and a new insert would be the next thing that you'd probably want to step up to. All right, so I would say the next thing I get asked about is probably my card holders. Now, the card holders that I have, I made these for Thunderstone. So I'll put, again, it's things that I 3D printed. So all they are is little rectangles with some higher corners. And then I've got magnets in the corners so they stick to each other. I actually have two sizes. This is the taller size. There's a shorter size that I use. And that's really for when I play Thunderstone, is all of the various cards that I have out there. I use that for that. And actually, here, let me drag these out. And make a bunch of noise because that's right by my mic. If I grab these out, these are what I'm looking at using. These are the shorter versions, and I'm looking at using those for my Pathfinder ACG stuff, right? So I've got a short version, I've got a tall version, and magnets are placed such that they link to each other. And I'll put a link out there for that. Okay, so something to hold the cards, because when you get a big stack of sleeved cards, they tend to slide all over the place. It just helps with the organization. So that would be another thing. You can actually buy some ones that are used for card playing online, and I'm trying to remember canasta. So some canasta holders may be similar to this. This is another one that I 3D printed, but if you get a canasta one, I believe you can place cards sideways in there. And they make a bunch of clear ones that are pretty cheap that you can get on Amazon. So something to organize your card decks and keep them pretty is another thing. All right, so now we get into those things are fairly cheap. Well, the 3D printing stuff is cheap if you've got a 3D printer. If you don't have a 3D printer, then you're buying them, and even the card holders can be cheap. But next we're going to get into stuff that's a little more on the expensive side. So, one more cheap thing. You don't see these because they're off screen most of the time, but something to hold your tokens. These are dollar store, they're like 3 for $1 or 4 for $1, little glass bowls, right? Just something to toss your tokens in. I'm all about the dollar store, so there's a lot of pieces that I'll get from the dollar store. So yeah, I have a wide variety of these just to put my tokens in and help keep things organized. I also like they're a little bit weighty, so you don't easily knock them over. I have some little plastic cups, but they tend to fall over easily, and the weight of the glass kind of holds them on the table. And I like things that feel a little bit more substantial, so the glass jars or glass saucers feel more substantial, right? So when I have my tokens in there, it's nice. Feels like it's premium. Okay. And speaking of premium, that's kind of the next thing that we're at is now you want to take your game up to the next level. The tokens that come with the game, I think, are very satisfactory. Like I liked playing with those originally. The next thing that I stepped up to were the Team Covenant tokens, which I like a lot. So I've got the base Team Covenant set, which has the threat tokens in it, and then you have kind of the damage tokens. You have your standard markers for 1 and stunned. Like, these are great. The artwork on them is beautiful. For confused, you have tough. These are fantastic tokens. So if you are playing by yourself or with a small group, I would highly recommend the Team Covenant tokens. I would, if I wasn't broadcasting, I probably would be using these tokens exclusively. What I did do, though, is because I'm broadcasting, I went out and got some other tokens. And I'll have to put the link for those. Those came from across the seas. I can't remember. I think it's Buy the Same Token, and I believe they're out of England. I'll need to double check that, but I'll put the link in the stuff below. But that's what all of these tokens are. And the reason that I have these is because I think they project better up to the camera. So these are, again, these are also beautiful tokens. I think the Team Covenant tokens are more immersive, but I think these tokens display better for the camera. So I've got a set of those, and you've got like 10s and 50s, and if I was doing multiplayer, these would come into play a lot more often, but because I almost exclusively solo play, the big ones really don't do anything for me in this game. All right. Now, Team Covenant has holders that you can order, but when I went to get them, they were out of stock, which made me really mad. So what I had to do was I ended up printing my own. So I came up with my own plan. There were a couple that were similar online. I ended up coming up with my own plan for holders. So what you see here is I've just got a couple slots on the side, and you can move the cards back and forth here in the middle. All right, so you can use your holder like that or like that, and the tokens fit in here. Now, a item of note is that these tokens are slightly, ever so slightly, like 1 millimeter larger than the Team Covenant tokens. So the original one, I had an original plan for these, and I had to actually slightly embiggen my slots here so that the new tokens would fit in there. So buy the same token, just slightly larger. But I would recommend, so I'll put the link to this. I've got them out on Thingiverse. If you print off 3 for solo play, that's enough. By the time you start doing Wrecking Crew, then it's going to depend on, do you want 1 for each of the Wrecking Crew characters plus your character? If you do multiplayer, you're going to need 1 for each person at least. There's the possibility of having 1 for each side scheme out there. That's probably overkill. But at the point that you get a 3D printer and you're printing them off yourself, it's not all that tough to procure more of them. They just tend to take a little while to print. Like I said, Team Covenant has these that you can get from them when they're in stock. I personally haven't had any of those. From what I've read, is they're like the ones that I print, I don't do a lot of infill on. So I would imagine that the Team Covenant ones are much more substantial and have a more solid feel to them. Plus, they kind of have a neat design in them too. So if you really want to bling it up, I would suggest going with the Team Covenant ones, because they're pretty nice. And on Etsy, you've got a lot of them out there. The reason to use these that I find is it helps really keep your tokens in place for where you want them to be at. Like when I do my side schemes, I tend to knock the tokens around and potentially move them out of place. When I have them here, I feel like it's very solid in where it needs to be. All right. The same thing for my villain health, is keeping track of it there. So I really, really like these holders for the tokens for my main things that are going on. I don't think you need 1 for every side scheme. I think that's overkill. The other thing that I use when I'm playing by myself, but not when I'm broadcasting, is the Team Covenant tokens have tough and stunned on them. And, I'm going to reach way over here. The buy the same token ones also have some tough and stunned ones and confused. And they're also pretty nice. Like, they look pretty cool. But the problem is when I drop that on my character here, I think from camera view, it's tough to see what that actually is. So that's why I tend to use the cards, is the cards are a little bit more visible in what's going on. But that's actually a fairly expensive upgrade, is to be buying all of those tokens. And the cardboard ones actually make me pretty happy. I think this is just taking it up another notch. Let's see, I think that's about it for all of the Marvel Champions upgrades that I have. I did at one point in time get hard plastic cases, like bigger hard plastic cases for my character cards, and they were magnetic and would stick together. Those were neat for about 3 plays, and then I got annoyed with them and got rid of them. If you weren't using token holders and stuff, they might be okay. They do give you a very substantial feel to when you go alter ego to hero mode and back and forth, and that's kind of nice. But overall, I didn't. In the end, I didn't like them, and I would suggest staying away from them. They're nice, but I wouldn't use them, or I don't use them essentially. So I can't think of anything else on the Marvel Champion side that I'm doing. I've thought about ordering more tokens, and there's a couple other makers out there of tokens that I've entertained the idea of getting. I do like the idea of the specific Hawkeye tokens with the little arrows on them. That's pretty cool. And I'm waiting to see as what do I want to say, as Black Widow and Doctor Strange and Hulk roll in if there are additional tokens that I may need to get for that. I guess the other thing that I would mention as part of my being into Marvel Champions, I've also done subscriptions with Team Covenant so that as things roll out, I get them because it can be kind of tough to hunt them down. And my local game shop that I go to doesn't always have, like, Marvel Champion stuff will sell out what they get allocated really fast. So having subscription with one of the providers out there that do that is that's a thumbs up. So I would totally recommend doing that. All right. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut over, and if you all you want to know about was Marvel Champions, and you probably want to stop here. The next stuff I'm going to go to is what I use for my recording. All right. So what you'll see is I've got a top-down view, and I started off with less gear than I've got now, and I've kind of built myself up. So what I've got now, I would totally not recommend hey, you want to start, you're going to go buy this stuff. So let me turn on something here. So one of the things that I have, I make a lot of use of these little Logi cams, right? These are like 1080p cams. Normally I use them a lot for work, right? Because I do a lot of video conferencing for work. So I have a variety of these, and previously I had these plugged into a laptop, and that was my overhead cam, my face cam, and then my card cam that I was doing. I was using all of these, and then I was using a laptop to power all of that. As I've stepped up a little bit, then the power from the laptop, I really needed to make sure the laptop that I had didn't have all USB 3 connections to handle all of the input. Plus it didn't have a powerful enough processor. So I ended up stepping up to a desktop in order to handle all that. So let me turn this camera on, and I'll show you a little bit of what I see from my view. So let's see here. This camera's hooked up, and I'm going to turn it on. And there we go. All right. So this is what I see from my view. Let me back up a little bit here. Is this right here. All right. So what you're seeing here is that's my camera that does my high view there. I've got a couple of eyes on it. That helps me focus on the camera and not on the screen behind it when I'm talking to the camera, right? What you also see there is I've got a Amazon Basics microphone, which I've found very good for recording sound. You see this right here is my card cam. So how this works is I'm using my recording software here is OBS Studio that I have running into my desktop that's sitting there. And then this is one of the cameras that's going in there. And that's actually the top camera. I've got layers of the cameras. One is my little personal camera. And then I've got, like right now, I've got this camera, my desktop. My overhead one is way down on the bottom. All right, so I've got chroma keyed to green that covers the whole desktop. And when I drop that on there, that camera sees that card. And I've got it just off to the side screen of where my overhead camera is. So that's how I display cards on the side. I try to zoom in so that card takes up most of the space. And then I've got, you see, I've got my remotes there. That helps me know what's on and off camera. And actually you'll see that over here, I've got a game topper coaster here that helps me know from overhead. If I go just beyond my game topper coaster right here, my fingers start to show up on my desktop, right? So that helps me know when I'm dropping cards out for play, how they're supposed to sit, right? So I can try to keep them on camera. Now let's see, other stuff is, well, I've got this Game Topper Surface, and I've had that for a long time. We're doing a monthly gaming session. Sometimes it's a little bit more often than that, but I bought that for when my friends come over and play. I did switch up just specifically for recording. I've switched up to a background that's a little less jumbled because I had like a blue square background and a red square background, and they just seemed a little bit busy. And I think this is a little less busy, so it allows for the cards to come through. Let's see here. What other things should I point out here? So the cup holder, and usually there's a Guinness or a whiskey or scotch there. That's an essential part. Well, I think that's an essential part of gaming. It's kind of like sleeves. You have your opinions. I think a Guinness or a scotch is a great part of gaming. So there we go. Other parts of my setup is you'll see I have some mic stands there, and I use that for my camera, but I've also got a mic stand that goes up, and I've got a couple of lights. I've got one light there. I have another light over on the other side, and those try to keep me well lit up and keep the table well lit up so everybody can see everything. And then I've got another stand that goes up and all the way up, and I have a board that runs across the top, and that's where I've got my camera mounted going down. So that is a fairly recent purchase. That used to be another one of these webcams, but recently I upgraded to a nice little camera to do my top view because I wanted to get better resolution from my top view. So all I've got doing that is there's a couple of stands. There's a light stand there, and a light stand over there, and I've got a board clipped to it to hold my camera up. So that actually goes to an HDMI card in the back of the PC to read it as it comes in. So sometimes I'll zoom it in, sometimes I'll zoom it out, depending upon the game, but that's what I use for that. All right, other parts of this setup are, let's see, I think you'll see off screen, usually my keyboard's right off screen. The camera's zoomed out a little bit, so I don't have all of my table in there. So all this junk that's normally sitting on the side over here, you don't see, because I've got my camera zoomed in and it's just off of camera, but in reach. So I use that fairly often. I hesitate to show behind me a little bit more. You can see my shelves here that have games, but I have a whole nother larger set of shelves there that have games. Everything underneath is games. And then I actually have another storage for games too. And there you see my Gloomhaven map. So what are other things that are part of my setup? So the TV I actually got in order to help play Gloomhaven with my friends when we were going down that path. I thought it would help a lot. Actually, it's kind of a funny thing because this house that we got had a massive console TV in it. It was like one of those ones that stood like 4 feet high and it was like a 40-inch tube TV, maybe 37, in this massive console. And getting it out of this basement was really tough. So for the cost of a new TV and haul away, it would cost about as much as it would be so Best Buy's got a thing where if you buy a TV of a certain size and pay a little bit extra for the haul away, I could get them to haul away the console TV, and that costs just a little bit more than paying somebody to come get the TV and take it away. So that's how I ended up with a large TV down here to do game stuff on, because I thought that was a good deal. So there we go. But really, that's about it. Amazon mic. The computer that I've got, I ended up getting a nicer computer from Blair Technology Group. So that's a government's surplus off-sale computer that they've refurbished, right? So government, after 3 years of having it, has gone out and sent it back. So I ended up buying one that's got all USB 3 and a decent processor in it. I'm kind of cheap that way. I've got some decent stuff, but I tend to save money where I can, right? 3D print my own stuff. I got a bunch of dollar store pieces. I do have some fairly expensive tokens though. So, and then let's see here. Let's see if I can get it to show without. You can see I'm using OBS here, and in OBS I've got a set of cameras set up. I've got my Amazon mic, my overhead cam, my chat cam, and then right now I've got the table cam is the one that's in my hand, and then my mic's pretty loud. I use OBS to blend everything as it comes in, and then actually to do my final take of my video, I use Blender in order to put the intro and the outro onto the video and come up with the final video. And I try to, I guess one of my goals is to do a minimal amount of work while I'm doing my videos, so that way I can do more videos. You can get wrapped up in pre and post production and just spend hours and hours and hours on that. And I would rather play more games than do pre and post production. So, all right, I think we'll stop there. There's my keyboard. I'm gonna turn this camera off. Let's see if I turn the right one off. All right. So that's really kind of the quick overview of the setup of what I'm using to play Marvel Champions and what I'm using to record Marvel Champions, right? And I've built this up over time. So I started off with just my old laptop and a couple of these cameras. And then I was using OBS on the backside, and then I started to want to upgrade and add more pieces. And that's what I've done over time. So bought the better mic, bought another Logicam, wanted better overhead, so I got another camera for overhead, wanted better lighting, picked up a couple of lights. Like I've gradually incremented into a better system over time. So yeah, definitely don't just go run out and buy all this stuff. What I would recommend to start off would probably be like maybe start off with one camera and record and see if you stick with it for a little while. That was the whole thing when I started, was I wanted to put maybe $200 or $300 in. And then if I only made 4 videos and stopped because it was a hassle, then that's what I would be out, as opposed to if I were to sum up everything that I've gotten at this point in time, we probably we're over $1,000, I would say, between the computer and all of the cameras and the microphone and all of that. Like, don't start there. Start basic. See if you stick with it, and if you stick with it, then add to it. So I guess that's the quick tour, and hopefully that answers some of the questions about the pieces that I've got or what it is that I'm using. I'll put links to the 3D printing plans for the stuff that I've got. I'm not a professional 3D printer modeler of stuff, so there's probably issues with this stuff. But they work for me. So if you see what I'm playing with and you want it, then you can make it yourself and see whether it works for you or not. So that's it for now. Hopefully I've covered all the questions that you've been asking. And if you've got more questions, let me know in the comments and I'll respond back as best that I can. And it's time to get back to some game playing. So thanks for watching.